When we talk about NES baseball games, this game tends to be overlooked. Tecmo Baseball is not an awful game, but it's also not a great game. It should remind you right away of Bases Loaded. In fact, there are parts of this game that look like they were lifted directly from Bases Loaded. But the game itself is honestly kind of mysterious. Yeah, it's a mysterious game. It's mysterious in the sense that I can hardly find any information about this game at all. Tecmo had never made a baseball game before Tecmo Baseball came out. Now, this game had a 1988 copyright date, but all of the evidence that I've seen indicates that it wasn't widely released until something like late February or early March 1989. And absolutely none of the video game magazines even bothered to say anything about it. Plus, of course, it was totally overshadowed by Tecmo's football game. Okay, so technically speaking, this 1985 arcade game called Tekkon World Cup was Tecmo's first sports video game. This was a big hit in Europe, but is mostly unknown in North America. And it dates back to when Tecmo was still called Tekkon, right before a merger changed the name to Tecmo. Tecmo then came out with an arcade football game in 1987 called Tecmo Bowl. This game was popular at the time, but is actually pretty obscure today. Now, the problem with the arcade version of Tecmo Bowl, I'm talking about not like the Versus version, like the original arcade version, is that the game is unbelievably slow. It just takes forever to do anything, and it's really frustrating. So Tecmo decided to solve that problem. Around the time the company was developing Tecmo Baseball, it also developed an NES port of Tecmo Bowl. This game was a lot faster than the earlier arcade game. And it was clearly the best football game on the NES when it was released, there's no doubt about that. Its sequel, Tecmo Super Bowl, is legendary to this day. Anyway, you can check out videos of me playing Tecmo Super Bowl pretty much every day over on my football channel, so check out the link in the description for more stuff. Anyway, the success and the popularity of the original Tecmo Bowl wound up completely overwhelming Tecmo Baseball to the point where very few people really knew that it was a thing, and that's really puzzling to me. The only thing even close to a review I could find of Tecmo Baseball comes from issue 3 of Nintendo Power, which of course is a collector's item these days. Nintendo Power gave it a single paragraph in the video shorts section where it stuck all the games that it didn't want to give a lot of attention to. To put it into perspective, Tecmo Baseball was right next to Challenge Pebble Beach and right below the awful first Ghostbusters NES game. But there was this quick review of Tecmo Bowl on the page right across from the Tecmo Baseball blurb. So that's the thing about this game, it can never get away from the same company's football game. Now, it's not that Tecmo Baseball is an awful game, it's just missing a lot of the features that made Tecmo's other games great. So the first thing you need to know is that the behind the pitcher camera angle is really annoying. At the beginning of the game, you will find it impossible to catch up to any of the pitches. The fastest of the fastballs can only be hit if you swing right when the ball leaves the pitcher's hand. But you will also run into slow balls, which will really ruin your timing. You can swing up or down depending on where the ball is pitched. But the problem is that you usually don't have time to see where your pitch is going before you swing. So yeah, it's not necessarily awful, to be honest with you. I mean, I've seen much worse pitching systems. The problem here is that it does take a few innings to get used to how you're supposed to swing the bat. And like I mentioned, the perspective looks a lot like Bases Loaded. Now, we know that Bases Loaded came out in North America in the summer of 1988. The original Bases Loaded had tons of voice samples, which was really cool at the time. But it was also a very slow game and can be really annoying after a while. Tecmo Baseball is a lot faster, though it doesn't have anything like those voice samples. And of course, when you hit a home run in Tecmo Baseball, you get a montage that comes straight from Bases Loaded. Can you see the similarity? Anyway, batting in this game isn't perfect. I guess it's passable. Pitching, on the other hand, is kind of strange. In theory, pitching the ball is a three-step process. You're supposed to hold up or down when you push A to control the speed of the pitch. You're then supposed to push the direction you want the pitch to go on the control pad. And then you're also supposed to be able to choose whether the ball curves or if your slow ball winds up dropping. In reality, you usually end up just holding down some button and hoping for the best. The strike zone in this game is extremely wide anyway, and for the most part, the batters aren't going to hit the ball out of the park, so you can pitch however you want. And honestly, the pitching system is also taken straight from Bases Loaded, except for the fact that it doesn't feel like it works all that well in Tecmo Baseball. It feels really awkward and slow and sluggish. I've mentioned before that I like the pitching system in Bases Loaded 2 the best. It just feels good to put the high heat right by the hitter for strike 3. Tecmo Baseball's pitching system is a lot harder to control, and it doesn't give you the same rewarding feeling when you get it right. And then you've got the fielding system, which isn't horrible, but also really isn't all that great. The fielding in Tecmo Baseball just feels unpolished. It's hard to get base hits, which is actually kind of nice. This is one of the few NES games to feature players that can, actually throw the ball. And the nice thing is that the perspective gives you a good view of the field. Unfortunately, the camera takes a little while to move to the outfield. But overall, it's really not that bad. Now, the biggest complaint about this game that I have is the base running system. It's backwards, right? So you have to push towards the base that you're currently on to move over to the next base, not up to the next base that you want to go to. So you've got to push towards first base and push B if you want to go to second. It takes a while to get used to this. This system exists in a couple of other games, like, for example, the old black box baseball game. But of course, the vast majority of 8-bit baseball games just use the Famista approach. And so it's pretty easy to feel lost and confused when you play Tecmo Baseball for the first time. Anyway, like I've been saying, this is not a horrible baseball game, but it's not really a great one either. The strangest thing about this game is that it's really obscure, even though it's actually a common NES game, and I'm not really sure I understand what's going on here. According to RarityGuide.com, Tecmo Baseball is as common as Tecmo NBA Basketball, as well as really awful games like Roger Clemens MVP Baseball and George Foreman KO Boxing. I was surprised to learn that since I had never heard of this game when I was a kid, but maybe that was just me. Anyway, the earliest advertisements for this game I could find come from the middle of February 1989. Of course, that was back during the chip shortage, which means that the game might have been released earlier than that, but was just unavailable in the vast majority of stores. There were gradually more advertisements for this game alongside horrible products like the LJN talking baseball cards that never worked right. Anyway, it was in those newspapers that I found the only actual contemporary review of Tecmo Baseball that I've been able to locate anywhere. A few newspapers reprinted this article from an issue of the old Orbit Video magazine. Tecmo Baseball gets a good review, but of course it's right underneath Tecmo Bowl. And you can find RBI Baseball on the side. The reviewers claimed that the graphics in that game are not as good as they are in Tecmo Baseball. I don't know, you be the judge. Do you think RBI Baseball looks worse? And this doesn't really matter, of course, since this is back in the days before people really took video game reviews seriously. So back in those days, for the most part, magazines would publish articles that were directly taken from the advertising copy. It's only nowadays that we've got people crazy enough to go look backwards and tell you all about the games that suck, so go figure. Tecmo Baseball had a selection of 14 teams, which is kind of an unusual number. None of these teams have real players, though it's not hard to figure out which players represent which real-life player. Now, the other bizarre thing about this game is that it doesn't seem to be based on a Japanese game at all. At least, I haven't found any Famicom game that is like this game. So maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. Honestly, I think that this game would have probably been a little bit more polished if Tecmo had developed it in Japan first and had tested it against the Japanese market. The biggest strike against this game, though, is that Tecmo came out with a better game the next year. So the game we know as Bad News Baseball was released in Japan in December 1989. It came out in North America in June 1990, and it caused everybody to forget all about Tecmo Baseball. The annoying behind-the-pitcher viewpoint was completely gone. But the good fielding was still there. Bad News Baseball is probably one of the best baseball games on the NES. You could argue, in fact, that it is the best. Tecmo Baseball, meanwhile, is pretty mediocre. So that makes me wonder why in the world Tecmo released this baseball game in the first place. You know, they didn't have like a big advertising campaign around it. It's not like it was for those big baseball games in summer 1988. I assume that they made quite a bit of money off of this game, but in retrospect, it seems like they really didn't try all that hard. It's almost like they didn't care. And it really is a shame since this is not really an awful game. Anyway, it's still worth playing Tecmo Baseball every now and then. Again, it's like playing Bases Loaded, except it's a lot faster. And it really can be a challenge. But unfortunately, it's kind of a middle-of-the-road NES baseball game. Anyway, I still wish I could find more information about this game. It seems to just have been forgotten, which is why it feels like it's so obscure, even though it's actually pretty common. It looks like they really did sell a lot of copies, but everybody forgot about it because of Tecmo Bowl, and then Bad News Baseball came around and ensured that nobody would care anymore about the first Tecmo Baseball game. And that's kind of a shame.